Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, WK Kellogg Bird Sanctuary, Michigan's Heart of Trumpeter Swan Conservation. My name is Margaret Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of the Trumpeter Swan Society. And we hold these webinars to share the story, the fascinating and wonderful story of how the trumpeter swans were restored across North America. And today's story is going to include part of the story of Michigan, which really played an important role in the Midwest restoration. Just a couple of housekeeping details. Today's webinar is being recorded. You as a participant are muted and your video is turned off. We do encourage lots of questions. So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And at the very end of the webinar, as you're closing your browser, there'll be a very short survey that I hope you'll fill out because I look at all that and it's really important for me to know what y'all think. And you will receive a link to the recording via a Zoom email in 2 days. Before I get started, I want to introduce some people from the Trumpeter Swan Society Education Committee. Marianne Coughlin will be asking the questions that you put into the Q&A box. Jim Hawkins is here as well from the Yukon. Lisa LaFranco is here as well. And Jeff Nelson, who is our president, is also on the education committee. And I'd like Jeff, if you could, just to take a couple minutes to talk about what we do, Trumpeter Swan Society does.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. And thank you to everyone for taking time out of your busy lives to attend. I think it's going to be a really interesting presentation. The Trumpeter Swan Society is a pretty small nonprofit, and it's really focused on restoring trumpeters back to their historical range. They were pretty well extirpated by 1900, and so it started about 50 years or more ago, and it really started by trying to bring the swans into habitat that they hadn't been in many, many years, and it's now proceeded as the swans have begun to recover into a variety of other things. And to do that, we have a board that's really split into two different groups, or two committees. One is just focused on conservation issues affecting swans, and then the other is conservation education. And this webinar is brought to you by the conservation education side of the board. The board's only 12 or 15 of us, and so it's a small board, but they're very active and energetic. Some of the things we get involved with are funding research and even some planning projects. But sometimes it's research at universities, and you'll hear about some of that in this presentation. We also host a Trumpeter Watch. This is an opportunity for citizen science to get involved with trumpeter conservation and restoration, where you can enter observations of trumpeters on our website, and you'll hear more about that later. We do sign-on letters. We work with other groups. Some are very large, some are small. We try to push policies that are going to be effectively for trumpeters. And we also raise matching funds for some grants that others are putting conservation of habitat projects on the ground. And then we, of course, have always been concerned about lead poisoning, power line collisions. So we work to try to minimize those impacts on trumpeter recovery. So we do a variety of things. We work with education for children, with coloring books and that sort of thing through the zoos and other ways of getting the word out. So today we're going to hear about what we're doing or what's being done for trumpeters. We're probably a small part of that in Michigan, and specifically through the WK Kellogg Bird Sanctuary. And our speaker today is Lisa Duke. She's the sanctuary ground manager at the sanctuary, and she's going to tell us what's going on with trumpeters in Michigan, and then we're going to have an opportunity to follow up with questions. So again, thank you very much for getting involved with the trumpeter conservation and for joining us today. Lisa?
Oh, we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome. So WK Kellogg Bird Sanctuary, yeah, we're located in Michigan and have been highly involved in trumpeter swans in our state and bringing them back. Thank you for the nice introduction. And yeah, my name is Lisa, I have been at the Bird Sanctuary. This is year 13. I started in 2012. My background is I actually have a bachelor's degree from Michigan State University in zoology with a concentration in zoo and aquarium science. So my background is animal husbandry. So I started at the Bird Sanctuary as the avian caretaker and slowly transitioned up into doing all of the things now. So if you come out and visit us, it is highly probable that you will find me. So where are we located? The Kellogg Bird Sanctuary, we are in the state of Michigan in the United States. So we have a super fun shape. We are shaped like a mitten, and we have two peninsulas. There's the lower peninsula right here, and then the upper peninsula. And our bird sanctuary is located in the southern lower southwest corner of Michigan. The W. Kellogg Bird Sanctuary is part of the Kellogg Biological Station. We are Michigan State University's largest off-campus field station. This field station hosts about 12 faculty right now, all of their graduate students, their postdocs, and undergraduate students through the summer. And we are a world-renowned center for research, education, and outreach. The station itself has about 4,500 acres of land in our Kalamazoo, Berry County region. And the majority of that is actually agricultural fields. There is active research currently on climate change and our food sources upcoming. So big stuff is happening in our area. So check us out if you are here. The bird sanctuary, we are a public venue. We are a different kind of nature center. We are located in Augusta, Michigan. We are open to the public. Current hours are Wednesday to Sundays, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. But we host a variety of public programs throughout the year, field trips for schools and other groups. And we actually host a webinar series also. If you guys want to check us out, it's called the Birds and Coffee Chat. It's the second Wednesday of the month on different topics. So free Zoom program. So you can join us from wherever you are in the world. But we have about 3 miles of trails that are open to the public, and we house a variety of birds here, birds of prey, and waterfowl, and our upland game birds. So currently that's pheasants and quail. The majority of our birds are rehabilitated birds. So these are ones that were hatched out in the wild, injured in some fashion, and we are now their forever home. But it all started with this gentleman. This is W.K. Kellogg. And if anyone enjoyed a bowl of cornflakes this morning, that was because of him. So W.K. was very instrumental in our local community, starting in the Battle Creek region. And the history was that he listened to a lecture by a gentleman called Jack Miner, who had a bird sanctuary in Kingsville, Ontario, based around the Canada goose. And WK decided that he could do the exact same thing. So the sanctuary was established in 1927. So at that period in time, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act had just been enacted about a decade before that. It was the National Parks Movement time, so conservation was on everyone's kind of mind, and WK had the resources and the drive to kind of jump into that field. So this land, we have about 180 acres of land, as I said, was purchased in 1927. The sanctuary was established. And then it was gifted in 1928 to Michigan State. It was the Agricultural College at that time, to make sure that this land, this property, would be set aside as a school for practical training in animal care and land management. So this property historically started as old agricultural field, fallow field. And in the middle of our property is Wintergreen Lake. So it is a 40-acre lake. It's very shallow. It's only about 20 feet deep. And then throughout the next following decades after the sanctuary started, they planted a lot of trees. So this landscape is very highly modified, lots of influence by people. But we are quickly approaching our 100th anniversary in 2027. But we have been a place for people to come visit, to come and see the birds that reside here year round. And we have had a long impact on our bird populations, which we will get into. So our story first started with the Canada goose. As I was saying, W.K. Kellogg attended this lecture by Jack Miner. And at that time in 1927, when the sanctuary started, the Canada goose was only here during the spring and fall migrations. They were not year-round residents in Michigan. So an effort was made to try to increase the numbers of this species specifically for hunting purposes. And geese were brought from the Jack Miner Bird Sanctuary to the Kellogg Bird Sanctuary. Their offspring were allowed to free fly. They could leave and go and nest in other areas of the state. And then also involvement with the Michigan DNR happened where Canada geese from here were actually moved throughout the state of Michigan to increase their numbers also. So all of these efforts continued from 1928 and into the 1960s, and the Canada goose population steadily increased to the point that they're almost a nuisance. There's over 300,000 in Michigan that can be seen today, but the Canada goose has adapted very, very well to our human modified landscape. They love a mown lawn, and they don't mind being around people. But the Canada goose was our start. And then our sustaining history and legacy is the involvement with the trumpeter swan restoration into our state of Michigan. I'm going to start by explaining what 3 species of swan that you might actually see if you are here in Michigan. And as you guys are attending this lecture, I'm pretty sure you know what a trumpeter swan is, but gorgeous, gorgeous birds. Large white birds, black beaks, and have that cute little pink lipstick mark. Gorgeous loud trumpet call, and our heaviest bird in North America that can fly, weigh between 20 to 30 pounds. And then the second swan species that you could potentially see in our area and why this is of note is the mute swan. Mute swans are not native to North America. They are from that Eurasia band. They were brought over and introduced into Michigan in 1919 by a private individual that had them as pets and allowed those cygnets to expand outward. And then the last census in 2020, earlier this year in 2025, the current estimated population in Michigan is about 10,000 mute swans. So their population right now is much higher than our trumpeter swan. And then you might also perchance see tundra swans. They are not year-round residents here. They're typically only here through spring and fall migrations. You might see an individual here and there. I've had a juvenile that have stayed here on Wintergreen Lake through the winter. But most of the time it's just spring and fall migration. And then these guys are highly migratory, moving from the northern tundra region to the coastlines in larger flocks. Which we actually might be seeing pretty soon, which is exciting to think about. Because fall and winter is coming quickly. But tundra swans, they're about half the size of our trumpeter swans. Very fun to see when they're in a mixed flock. Very striking of like, you are so much smaller. So why do we need to know about what 3 species of swan you might see? Because of the history. So trumpeter swans were extirpated from our area by 1900. This was mostly due to habitat loss, due to filling in of our wetlands, also due to overhunting. A lot of the time for feathers, at the fashion of in the 1800s was fancy ladies' hats, using feathers. The trumpeter swan flight feathers are very strong and sturdy and made very good quill pens. Also, their down is amazing. If you have ever held a trumpeter swan in your arms before, you know how soft and luxurious their feathering is. But yeah, all of the feathers on their bodies were used for different products. So they were gone from our state. But the reason why the restoration project was thought to even begin is because there was historic record of them in our state. So Cadillac, there's this famous quote of that he said about the Lake St. Clair region, which is near Detroit, in Michigan, that there are such large numbers of swans that the rushes among which are massed might be taken for lilies. There were also museum specimens that were documented for Michigan in the 1800s. So there was this historic record that there used to be a large quantity of trumpeter swans in our state, but they were gone. So an idea was hatched. So starting in the late 1980s, a group of biologists from agencies across Michigan decided to start the Trumpeter Swan Restoration Program. And this was after successful projects have been started in other states. So main key players were the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, the non-game program, and then also us at the Bird Sanctuary. And the person that was instrumental in this was Joe Johnson. And then just working groups, we are part of the Mississippi Flyway. And then Margaret was going to chime in.
Yep. So this is a picture of Joe Johnson, and this is actually a screenshot taken from our film project, Return of the Trumpeters. Joe is a hero and a legend, really, within the Trumpeter Swan Society. He was a moving and driving force on the Mississippi Flyway Swan Committee. The Flyways have technical committees, and there was a Swan Committee for the Mississippi Flyway. And Joe insisted that they come up with a plan, which is now called the Interior Population Management Plan, to come up with a plan to manage and restore the trumpeter swans in the Midwest. And he was on our board for a while. And so for us at the Trumpeter Swan Society we just consider him a legend. And he was really the driving force of the return of trumpeter swans to Michigan. That was it. Thank you.
Yeah. No, Joe has a long-lasting legacy in this area, and especially with the trumpeter swans, which, you know, within the span of my lifetime, we went from 0 to what we have today. So the goal of Michigan's program, so this restoration effort was initially guided by the 1984 North American Management Plan for Trumpeter Swans. And this was for to restore a self-sustaining migratory population of trumpeter swan in the Central and Mississippi Flyways. So this is that interior population. So their goal was to have 180 breeding pairs, so 2,000 individual swans by the year 2000 for that interior population. Michigan's specific goal was for 2 flocks of 100 birds each by the year 2000. So remember the shape of Michigan, we have the lower peninsula and the upper peninsula. So 100 birds in the upper peninsula and 100 birds in the lower peninsula. So how was this pitched to happen? So one of the projects was cross-fostering under mute swans, and then also release of juvenile birds. And these juveniles came from either captive parent-reared or hand-reared birds, which we'll get more details. So the mute swan fostering program went from 1986 to 1988. So this would happen with trumpeter swan eggs were placed under nesting feral mute swans. So 44 eggs were put out into the wild there. These eggs came from sources of zoos or private individuals that had nesting trumpeter swans on their property. And then so out of those 44 eggs, 31 cygnets actually hatched out, but only 6 of them made it to the flight stage. So this was not a successful way to get trumpeter swans back into Michigan, unfortunately. Some really fun pictures on the slide. This is Joe Johnson with a very angry mute swan. After just putting in some eggs into that nest there. And then also this is a mute swan, and these are 2 trumpeter swan cygnets. But yeah, this program was stopped after just 2 years. It was just not the way to go. So then a more intensive program was started in 1989, and this was collecting eggs from the wild population of trumpeter swans that still existed in the Alaska region. So Joe and DNR staff went to, this was Minto Flats in Alaska, and you can see this beautiful landscape, lots of wetland and areas for them to nest in. And 92 eggs total were collected. So when they came upon a nesting trumpeter swan, let's say they had 4 eggs in this nest, 2 were collected and 2 were left behind for the parents to rear. So they did not have a completely failed nesting season. So 92 eggs were collected during this effort. Those eggs were brought back here to the Kellogg Bird Sanctuary. And yeah, we still have the incubators. They're still in our research building. You can check them out if you ever come and visit. But out of those 92 eggs that were collected, 88 of those eggs hatched. So imagine, this is a full hands-on operation from here on out of rearing all of these 88 cygnets. And also baby trumpeter swans. So stinking cute. But of those 88 eggs and cygnets that first hatched, 80 of them survived to flight. If you think about it, that is amazing. Of humans rearing these birds with special needs, temperature, food, all of that, 80 of them made it to this point. And then these guys were reared here at the Kellogg Bird Sanctuary. This is again Joe Johnson with a cygnet. And the way that they kept them here is they would trim these are their flight feathers here, and they would trim these so that the birds could not fly away. But after molting season, those would come back in, and then they would be fully flighted again. So yeah, they were raised here for 2 years and then released throughout the state of Michigan. So from 1989 to 2005, 246 trumpeter swans were released in our state, all by efforts from the Kellogg Bird Sanctuary. So the sites that they were released was here. So our bird sanctuary here is in Augusta, Michigan. So we are Calhoun County, Berry County, Kalamazoo County region. Also along the Au River watershed area. So this is in the Lower Peninsula on the eastern, northern Lower Peninsula side, and then also in the Upper Peninsula in Seney National Wildlife Refuge. So with all of that effort, it turned into a conservation success story. So a total of 124 trumpeters were released as 2-year-old birds. And the goal, again, of our reintroduction program was to have 2 flocks of 100 swans each in the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula, And that goal was reached in 1997. So at that time, the coordinated reintroduction program between the Michigan DNR and the Kellogg Bird Sanctuary ended. But even though that program ended, the bird sanctuary did continue to work with private landowners and companies to release trumpeter swans. Most of those birds that were released came from either eggs that were donated by zoos that had pairs that were laying eggs. Those eggs were then brought here and hatched out, or sometimes it was their the cygnets of the year were brought before they could fly, and then those birds were spread throughout private land. So some consumer energy properties, Native American tribe properties, and then also private individuals that had proper habitat for these birds. So yeah, the active restoration program has now ended. Trumpeter swans are doing their own thing and surviving very well out in the wild. So where are they located now? So 2025, the most current estimated population is about 3,000 trumpeter swans throughout of our state. So 1997, we had that 200 birds. From 1997 to now, we're at almost 3,000, which is remarkable. And places that you can find them are basically around the same area where they were originally released. So Seney National Wildlife Refuge is right around here. They've spread a little bit along with like the Wisconsin population and stuff that is doing well. There's kind of probably intermingled there. This is the Sable River watershed area. We are right here. This is actually our competitors, like University of Michigan area is right over here, so the Ann Arbor region. There's noted populations in that area too. So they're doing very well. So what does the bird sanctuary do now that there isn't this active active work in conservation? So we're a partner. As I was saying earlier, we are able to house due to our permitting through the DNR and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but we can house rehabilitated birds. And we're one of the few facilities in our state of Michigan that can house rehabilitated trumpeter swans. We are set up for it. So a lot of our in our state of Michigan, rehabbers contact us if they have a trumpeter swan that is injured and needs a permanent home because they are non-releasable back out into the wild. So we try to work with our with the Trumpeter Swan Society or with the zoo and aquarium associations with trying to get those birds that we don't need to keep them here, but they could be useful for further reintroduction efforts throughout our country. And one of those stories was we had a bird here at the Kellogg Bird Sanctuary, eventually named Gus. And they needed a mate for a bird that was at the Sun River Nature Center. Unfortunately, the male Chuck passed away, and his mate Grace needed a boyfriend. So we had a wild injured trumpeter come to us that thankfully was a good fit. After some testing to see what sex it was, Gus was determined that it would head that way as a mate for Grace. And thankfully, they made a good match and they did nest. Unfortunately, Grace, I think, passed away a while ago. So now Gus has a new mate, but still out in Oregon and contributing to that reintroduction effort in that state. So as I was saying, we are a home for non-releasable waterfowl. We do have trumpeter swans that came to us with different injuries of some fashion. One 62K has a wing injury from an impact. And actually, one of these was an imprint bird. This bird was separated from its parents and rescued by a pair of kayakers. Could not find the original family, so as a signet, this bird went to into a rehab program. A perfectly physically fine, gorgeous bird. Tried to release it here at the bird sanctuary, but it was too much bonded to people. So now he resides here, and he will be our bird. We also have a couple different birds. You can see we have the hybrid swan, which is a cross between a trumpeter and a whooper swan. So very similar looking to a whooper swan with the bright yellow on the bill here. And then we have a lot of Canadese right now, which have a condition called angel wing. And this happens when they're goslings, and it happens a lot in like city parks and areas where people are feeding birds bread, cereal, things that they would not be part of their nutrition in a normal wild diet. And it causes them to grow improperly, and it's a slipped tendon. So basically the tip of their wings will turn outward, and their wings can never sustain flight. So you can see this, it's either just one wing, the left wing or the right wing, or it could be both wings is how it presents. But unfortunately, these birds will never learn to fly. They're grounded from the start, basically. So their survival out in the wild is not great. So just an education piece of make sure that you are providing good, healthy food sources if for some reason you are feeding wild animals. We are also just a safe place. We are a sanctuary for all living things, but just personal observation of my own over time. So I've been here for 13 years. And we have two wild pairs of trumpeter swans that will nest on the property of the bird sanctuary through the summer. This is our current family. They had two cygnets this year that made it, doing really, really well. But then also there's this, I don't know, habit of the local trumpeter swan population where they will come and visit our site. So either during early in the spring when the lake thaws, we'll see a lot of trumpeter swans moving in, and a lot of them are going to be the pairs from the year before with their cygnets from the prior year. And it seems like those pairs will leave their cygnets here at the bird sanctuary and ditch them and then go off to their nesting grounds. So we have a large population at the bird sanctuary that will hang out with us through molting times, that are the non-breeders. So these are the ones that have are younger birds that have not paired off and mated into and made it to those nesting areas. So yeah, we have a large population that you can see through the summertime and into the winter. So threats to trumpeter swans still same for every location. The biggest one is lead poisoning. So our waterways are have lead from lead shot, lead sinkers, also industrial reasons, and trumpeter swans will ingest those as they're eating in our lake beds there. Here at the bird sanctuary, we do collect, if a wild trumpeter swan will pass away on our grounds here, we will collect those birds and send them up to the wildlife disease pathology lab, which is located right near the main campus of Michigan State University, but it's an effort for the Michigan DNR in monitoring our wild animal populations. But about 80% of those birds that have passed away here are due to lead poisoning, unfortunately. Another big thing is power lines. Trumpeter swans are really heavy. It takes them a really long time to lift off, and they can run right into those power lines, causing death. Habitat loss due to human interactions, disease. There's still avian influenza is a threat and moving through. There was just a report of it in Allegan County. We do get a couple birds with West Nile, but that is not the biggest one. But in our area, aspergillosis is a big issue, which is a fungal infection of the respiratory system. And that happens a lot especially in fall after the crops are harvested, and trumpeter swans will go out into the agricultural fields eating whatever is left out on the grounds. And if it's been warm and wet, it is a way for them to ingest that fungus and get sick. And also illegal hunting. There is no swan hunting at all in the state of Michigan. And then another thing, that angel wing condition, we have seen it in trumpeter swans. So people, I think, are the biggest threat to trumpeter swans at this moment in time. So yeah, think about what you put out into the world to try to protect it. But that's us. Margaret, if you want to chime in about the rest.
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. So Randy Napick can't be here with us. He works with the Michigan DNR. Most of you who have been getting our e-news know about the GPS tracking study that was done in the Midwest. And Michigan had swans that were included in that. So I want to talk a little bit about that, so you all have an understanding about the Michigan results. On the left side is a picture, and I received it this year in 2025, and that's 9J. And you'll see a little bit more about that. Next slide. Randy wanted me to let you guys know that reintroduction efforts in Michigan have been successful, and in 2023, Michigan moved the trumpeter swans from the state's threatened designation to a species of special concerns. And he wants folks to know that this signals that Michigan trumpeter swans are reaching recovery. That's a picture I took at Baker Sanctuary near Kellogg Bird Sanctuary. There's some beautiful, if you go in the fall to visit Kellogg Bird Sanctuary, you'll get the beautiful fall colors, and you can stop by this place as well. Go ahead. So Randy sent this picture of him going out there to capture the bird. So I wanted to explain what was in his boat so that y'all knew what was needed to capture these birds. So you can see 4J is collared. That's the swan that's there. We'll see a little bit more about 4J later, and that's Randy there. The arrows point to different supplies that he needed. So the red is a net gun for capture. And then you can see there's a tape measure there on the left side of that bin, and that's for measuring wings and different things. And in the blue tube is specialized glue for the collar. So the collar is round, but the edges have to be glued together. And then there's another arrow pointing to a little silver thing, and that's a scale for weight, where they'll put the swans in a bag with a hook, and then they'll hang that from that little weight thing, and they'll get a precise weight for the bird. And then in the bottom right, you'll see the silver or the metal Fish and Wildlife Service bands, leg bands. And so every bird that's marked gets a leg band, and that has a specific code that's unique to that bird. It's different from any collar code. And so if a bird loses its collar or whatever, that bird can still be identified by the Fish and Wildlife Service band. Next. So in this Midwest study, there were two different collars used. So Michigan had some, a collar supplier that had been from a mute swan study that Randy had done. So they used those collars, cellular tracking technology collar. And that's Randy there on the left. And on the right is David Wolfson, who actually led this large Midwest tracking study. And he's holding a Minnesota swan with an ornatella collar. And they're both white collars, and they're both GPS transmitting. They're just a little bit different. Next. So I asked Randy some questions because I thought y'all might be interested in these answers as I was. So Michigan put GPS collars on 13 adult swans with breeding, confirmed breeding. So these were swan pairs that had raised families. They got GPS collars. And I asked Randy, what do you want people in Michigan to know about your participation in the GPS study? Well, Michigan started in 2019. So the actual study started in 2019, and Michigan put out almost all of its GPS collars, while Minnesota, David Wolfson, put out 7 of the ornitholo collars because they were trying to figure out if the collars were going to work before they put out a whole bunch of them. And so Michigan, right from the get-go, was right at the very beginning of the tracking study. And this kind of research is really valuable for biologists to make informed decisions about wildlife. And it also helped not just Michigan, but Minnesota and Wisconsin and these other states that were involved in the study to understand the outcome of the restoration efforts and learn more about the swans from these GPS studies. Go ahead. So I asked Randy, well, why did you choose the specific sites where you collared swans? And he said, well, what he did is he did aerial flights over the 3 main areas that Lisa had already mentioned where there were the restoration efforts, because they wanted to make sure that it was representative of the locations that are used. So each of those numbers there are places where they spotted and took note of any swans that were there. And it was from those areas then that they chose where these capture sites were going to go. So they wanted to make sure that they included the Seney area, Sable River, and the Kellogg Bird Sanctuary area. And he also wanted to see if they could get any information about mute swan and trumpeter swan interaction. So they found a couple of sites where there was a trumpeter swan pair and a mute swan pair. And they put a collar on 2 of them. One of those swans, which was kind of near Kalamazoo, died. But the other one, 3J, which we'll see a little bit later, was another one with mute swan, trumpeter swan interactions. And I don't have any information about the results of that. So at the last slide, you'll see Randy's email in case anybody wanted to know what was going on with that. And he also chose sites where they had access, public access, either with public lands or private landowners that they had relationships with. So this is where they scouted out. And so the next slide, we'll see the actual capture locations. Lisa, there you go. Okay, so these were the actual places where they captured the swans. So in 2019, 12 of the 13 swans, were collared, and then 1 swan, 7K, was collared in 2020. So going down the map, you can see the upper peninsula that Lisa talked about, and the lower peninsula, which is the mitten shape. So 3J that you see there on the right, that was the one with the mute swan potential interaction. Right below that is 7K. That was the bird that was collared in 2020, and I'm going to call that the fan favorite because I got the most trumpeter watch reports about that bird. And then the bird that you saw on the boat with Randy, 4J, you can see there kind of by Saginaw. And then over on the left, near Traverse City, you'll see 9J. Just a couple of interesting things about the study is there were more swans that received collars than were actually tracked. And part of the reason for that is some of these swans died. And so the researchers recaptured the collars if the bird had died, and then they deployed them on another bird. And here in Michigan, the original 9J, which was kind of down there by the Lansing area, had died after about a week after it was collared. And at the same time, up where you see the 9J on the red, that bird actually had the collar called 5J, and that collar was cracked and wasn't transmitting. So Randy collected the collar from the 9J down there near Lansing and then redeployed it on the 5K up there near Traverse City. And I'll show you what that bird looks like. Next slide. So this is that bird, and you can see it's great habitat up there. And so so it's on the study, it's called 9J/5J, but 9J is there on the left with its family. And this is near Traverse City, which is a pretty good area for trumpeter swans. Next slide. And this is 7K, which I called the fan favorite. And so Randy took this picture of 7K in 2020 before it was captured and collared. Next slide. Just to briefly go over a couple things. So on the left is a map, and those are the movements of all 113 swans that were in the Midwest study. And you can see there's a lot of movement that's there, and there's even one Minnesota swan that went up to Hudson Bay. That was pretty cool. But on the left now, we see the movements of the Michigan swans that were in the Midwest study. And they did not leave the state of Michigan. Next slide. And this is a close-up of that. So there is movement, and there's some where you don't see the movement. We'll kind of explain a little bit about this. But these were the GPS tracks from 2019 through 2022. Next. So I asked Randy and then also David Wilson, who led the study, why did the Michigan swans, stay in Michigan all year, and realized that these were 13 swans that had confirmed breeding. So it's not obviously all the swans in Michigan, but it was these 13. And what both of them said was very likely it's because the rivers and waterways were open during the winter time, so there's food that's there in open water. And if swans don't have to expend the energy to migrate, they won't. If the eats are good and the area is safe, they'll stay there. And so that was one reason that they thought maybe the Michigan swans stay. There's open water. And then David Wilson, who led the study, thought that a couple other reasons might be that there was no what he called cultural momentum. In other words, the parents of cygnets hadn't found any new winter areas south to create migration patterns. And so the kids learn from the parents where to go. And if nobody's exploring that, there's not going to be that momentum to make those migration southward. And then he also thought that maybe the Great Lakes might have a moderating effect, to keep the waters open and habitat available for food. Next. And then I asked, well, okay, for those Upper Peninsula swans, did they all go south, to the Lower Peninsula in the winter? And he said, well, no, most of those Upper Peninsula swans stayed in the Upper Peninsula, but some of them did move to the Lower Peninsula. And he just wanted people to remember that when you have adult paired swans, they generally have their known migration routes, and they're not going to explore any more than what they have to because it's already known where they're going to go. And he thought that because they hadn't collared any young birds, that maybe that's why they also didn't see any other stronger migration movements or larger movements, because we know that those younger birds explore more, but they didn't put GPS collars on those younger birds. Go ahead. Next one. And then we have this program, as Jeff had mentioned, called Trumpeter Watch. And some of you who may be on this or are watching the recording may have submitted Trumpeter Watch reports to us. It's on our website. And I take those Trumpeter Watch reports, and if there's a marked swan, a swan with a collar or wing tag, I will send it to the person who banded that. And so I sent quite a few of them to Randy, and I asked him if having these Trumpeter Watch reports of these GPS swans was helpful. And he said, yeah, they were definitely helpful, because with the study, he only got timestamps and GPS coordinates that, that was the data that he got. But because of the Trumpeter Watch, he got pictures of the swans, he got information about the family, he could see if the collar was chipped or, if it was doing well, that kind of stuff, and what the habitat was like. So he found that the Trumpeter Watch reports that people submitted was really valuable. So anybody who submits Trumpeter Watch reports, thank you. Next slide. So just a few of the Trumpeter Watch reports that I got. I got quite a few, again, 13 swans in Michigan got GPS collars, and I think I got Trumpeter Watch reports of like 8 of them that came in. Here's a Upper Peninsula swan, Michigan 4K, and you can see it was captured there near Seney, in the Upper Peninsula, but it did cross the straits there to winter in the northern part of Lower Michigan. Next. And here's the fan favorite, 7K. And Lisa, if you can take your cursor and just point out the bright green area. So see that little triangle? That's where 7K stayed all year. So 7K really did not move at all. So it must have been, wonderful habitat there. And so This is at Tuttle Marsh, and I got lots of reports of that. Next. And these are other reports that came in where, you know, Randy could see what the birds look like and got reports of the family. So if looking at the top right, there's Michigan 6K. See the arrow there? Can you point that out, Lisa? Yeah. So that's the green. So you can see that that bird did travel. That was an upper, you know, it did travel a little bit, you know, to the lower peninsula. 2J, there is, if you can see it, that's the purple line there. Yeah, right there. So that bird also, you know, traveled a bit. And then 4J, going down 4J, that's there. That was actually the bird that was in the boat that we saw with Randy. So it did travel, you know, a little bit. And now going over to MJ, yeah, down there, you can see that that bird did not travel a lot. And then going up one more to 9J. So this was the bird that had the second deployment. It did travel a little bit. And so it was pretty cool to see, have pictures of these birds and actually then hook them up with, you know, where they traveled, you know, so that these birds are, you know, like real animals and, you know, they're real to see what they're doing. Next. But even though the Michigan swans, GPS swans pretty much stayed, well, they did stay in the state, Michigan also benefited from the GPS study because we found out that Minnesota bird 4T actually, you know, spent the winters over there near Kalamazoo at Wolf Lake Fish Hatchery. And David Wolfson, the Midwest team leader, gave me the map there on the left. And so this bird summers in Minnesota, or Wisconsin, yeah, it's Minnesota. And then it travels across Lake Michigan to the winter. And I've gotten a number of reports about 4T. And Melanie Martin was somebody who sent in reports over a couple years. And at the time, David Wolfson's map was updated. It was a public map. He updated the locations every week or so. And so Melanie had seen the, you know, 4T there in February, and then there was an ice storm. And then when she went back, that bird was gone from Michigan, and she went to the map and she could see where it was going over the next month. And so what she had on here is, these were reports information that I got from her reports is, she says, in late February 2023, I checked online map and realized she had made it back across Lake Michigan. By February 23, she made it to the center of Wisconsin. 4 days later, by the 27th, she was in the northwest corner of Wisconsin. And of March 12th, she and her family were back in Minnesota, you know, northwest of Grand Rapids, Minnesota. So that was really pretty cool, you know, to see that you guys are not just getting Michigan swans, you're getting some, you know, Minnesota swans as well. Next. And I also get reports of, this is a collared swan. This is Wisconsin collared swan. It's non-transmitting. And this was a rehab bird. This is a pretty interesting story. So this bird was rescued as a cygnet. You can see that. And it was rehabbed up at in Antigo, Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, by Marge Gibson at Reggie. And Marge was always wondering what was happening to these rehab birds that she was putting back into the wild. And the Wisconsin DNR had some yellow collars that were left over. And so in 2023, they put collars on this bird plus its siblings that had been orphaned. And this is OTO. And thanks to Trumpeter Watch, we knew, I shared this with Marge and with Senator Madison, is this bird spent a couple years in Wisconsin, but then it flew across Lake Michigan to Pentwater, Michigan, which was pretty exciting. And then later through Trumpeter Watch, you know, returned to Wisconsin. And then this past winter, it spent the winter down at Riverlands, Missouri, which is near St. Louis. And so this is, again, documentation that these young birds are real explorers. And obviously these orphan birds didn't have any parents to show them the way, so they were going all over. So it's just important to know that you guys are getting birds from all over. Next slide. And just so you know, your Trumpeter Watch reports are really valuable, and I do share them, but I wanted to share just a couple of things from the 2025 Trumpeter Watch sightings from Michigan. These are just a few. So if you haven't been to Seney, it's a beautiful place to go. On the left is what the swans look like up there, you know, in the wintertime. In the middle is an Ontario swan. that was seen near Ann Arbor in February of this year. And Michigan does get some Ontario swans, and you'll recognize those because they have yellow wing tags. And so those come in as well. So you guys get Ontario birds. And then there's, the nesting swans near Ann Arbor. So when, Lisa was talking about the comeback of the swan and where these areas were, and I did go to University of Michigan, so we are competitors, I guess, Lisa. Anyway, that's near that area. So your trumpeter watch reports are, really important. And next. And that's the end of my portion of that. And Lisa, did you want to add anything else before we get to this next part?
No, just if you are in our local area and if you want to see a trumpeter swan in person, haven't had that awesome privilege before, come check us out, come visit. They're here all year round.
Yeah, great. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and Marianne can ask those. And I just want to say, I've been to Kellogg Bird Sanctuary a few times, and it's a beautiful place. And if you go, certainly in October, which is when I've been, there's beautiful fall colors, and they are rural roads, and it's, it's really just fantastically beautiful.
Fall's the best.
Yeah, it's great. Marianne, were there any questions?
Yes, we do have some questions. So the first one is for Lisa. Is Michigan addling mute swan eggs or employing some other way to remove them?
Yeah, so there has been an effort through the Michigan DNR. I think it started in 2012.
Yep.
To control the mute swan population. And that is because their population is skyrocketing, basically, and they are in direct competition with the trumpeter swans. So there are ways to have them removed from properties. You have to have permits. You have to get a permit through the DNR. And private landowners can do that and do what you were saying, like oil the mute swan eggs that are the nesting ones, so that those nests are non-productive. And then there's stronger efforts that occasionally take place in problem areas with population control with culling.
Thank you. The next question is that the listener is saying it's wonderful to hear how useful the trumpeter watch reports are. Any idea how many of those reports the Trumpeter Swan Society gets per year?
Yeah, we get about 800 a year.
And then the next one is, there are a bunch of trumpeter swans at Erie Marsh Preserve. They weren't on the map in the presentation. Is there a different background story for them?
I don't think so. I think they've probably naturally spread to that area. It's just not marked on the map. So the one, I can go backward and close your eyes if this makes you motion sick. But there is the, where they're found currently was through the MNFI website. And I'm pretty sure that map was from like 2020. So it might be a little outdated. So.
Thank you. And then the last question is, where exactly near Traverse City was the location that you discussed? This is from someone who lives in Traverse City.
Oh, well, I'll have to take a look at the map. In the survey, if you put your name and email and put that question, then I can actually just email you a screenshot of where that bird is. It's like a Google Earth image, and then you can see where that is.
And those are all the questions, Margaret.
Marianne, I have a quick question. It's Jim Hawkins here in Whitehorse. The question for Lisa. You have swans overwintering in the sanctuary there, I understand. And
Yep.
So how many of them, and what do they eat in the winter? They go out and feed in the farm fields, or do they just stay?
Yeah, they'll move. So there's this is personal observation, Jim, of what they do during the day. So they the family groups will fly in and out, and they'll be with us on this property for a period of time. We do keep We have aerators that run in our lake that keep open pockets, because again, it's a very shallow lake. It will freeze over if we have a good solid Michigan winter. But yeah, they'll go out, they'll fly to different areas to whether it's the river systems and go feed there, but they will go out into agricultural fields and get food, corn, soybeans, all the three most popular ones they'll go out for.
Thanks.
I forgot to answer one thing. I think it was Rick that mentioned it about the mute swans. So the state efforts for the mute swan population control is they're never going to eradicate mute swans out of our state of Michigan. It was more just try to control the explosion of population growth. So I think their goal is to maintain about 2,500 mute swans in our state versus the like 10,000 that there is currently. And there's no hunting of swans in our area. So once our swans get to full adult size, there's really not a lot of issues for them other than disease or injury.
Great. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Lisa, for the great presentation and letting us know really what a treasure, you know, the Kellogg Bird Sanctuary is. And it's a beautiful place to visit, folks. So if you can go there, do go there. And obviously, I don't know if you had mentioned this, but the admission fees help pay for some of the care and the things that you do there, which is great. And I want to thank our panelists for being with us as well. And then for all of you who've attended, you know, I really appreciate you coming to this and being part of it and learning about swans. It's a huge pleasure to be able to do this, and I hope you enjoy them. At the end, as your browser closes, there will be a very brief survey. There's 5 questions. If you'd answer those, that'd be fantastic. And then the recording of this will come out again through an email from Zoom in about 2 days after I get it uploaded to YouTube. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone for everything that you've done and for coming and being a part of this. So thank you.